The cold November rain wept against the window pane, a mournful percussion that mirrored the silence inside the house. To the woman standing with her arms crossed, the old man by the door was just another piece of furniture to be disposed of, a relic of a life she was eager to erase. He clutched a single, worn duffel bag, his knuckles white against the cracked leather. He didn't speak. He didn't protest. He just stood there, his stooped shoulders carrying a weight far heavier than the meager contents of his bag. The woman, his daughter-in-law, finally sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated annoyance. She looked at him, her eyes as cold and hard as the polished marble of the kitchen island behind her. To her, he was just Arthur, the quiet, limping father of the man she had just buried, a ghost in her perfect home. Honestly, she began, her voice slicing through the somber quiet, must you be so morose? David is gone. It's tragic, yes, but life goes on. Mine, at least. She gestured impatiently towards the door, her perfectly manicured nails flashing in the dim light. Don't be dramatic. Pack your bags and learn to live on your own. You're a grown man. To them, to her, he was just another old man. A burden. A footnote in a closed chapter. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that the man they were casting out into the rain was a legend forged in fires they could never imagine. They saw a stooped janitor. They didn't see the titan who had once made armies tremble. Welcome to Stories That Matter, where we believe every life, no matter how quiet, holds a story worth telling. We search for the tales hidden in plain sight, the narratives of honor and integrity that often go unheard in a world that's too loud and too fast. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever been judged by your appearance rather than the content of your character, then this story is for you. It is a testament to the idea that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. It endures. It waits. It is. So please, stay with us on this journey. Settle in and prepare to witness a story that will remind you of the silent power that walks among us every single day. We encourage you to become part of our community, a place for thoughtful reflection and shared experience. Engage with the story, share your thoughts, and if our content resonates with you, consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing these vital narratives to light. Now let the story unfold. Let the rain fall. And let the silence speak of things that words cannot yet express. The house was no longer a home. It had been a sanctuary, a small pocket of peace Arthur had shared with his son, David, and David's wife, Amanda. But with David gone, the soul of the house had gone with him, leaving only a hollow, beautiful shell. A shell Amanda was now polishing, preparing for a new life. Arthur was the last smudge, the final imperfection she needed to wipe away. His presence was a constant, unwelcome reminder of a life connected to duty, service, and a kind of quiet masculinity she had always secretly resented. Arthur had lived a life of deliberate quiet. After leaving the service, a life he never, ever spoke of, he had sought anonymity like a man seeks water in a desert. He took a job as a night janitor at the local community college, finding a strange comfort in the echoing, empty hallways, in the simple, honest work of sweeping floors and cleaning windows. It was a penance of a sort, a way to be useful without being seen. He was a man of routines. Up at 4, a single cup of black coffee, a slow walk around the block, his right leg dragging with a disciplined, almost imperceptible limp. His room in David's house was sparse, containing a bed, a small dresser, and a single, framed photograph of a young woman with smiling eyes, his late wife, gone for decades. There were no medals on the wall, no uniforms in the closet, no hint of the man he once was. His past was a locked room, and he had long ago swallowed the key. His son, David, had been his anchor to the world, a bright, compassionate boy who had grown into a man of profound integrity. David had seen the steel behind his father's quiet eyes, had felt the unyielding strength in his calloused hands. Against Arthur's silent wishes but with his eventual solemn blessing, David had followed him into the service. He hadn't joined the same shadowy echelons as his father, a world Arthur had shielded him from, but he had served with honor. He had been a good soldier, a good man. And now he was gone, his life cut short not on a battlefield, but by a reckless driver on a rain-slicked highway. Amanda had never understood the bond between them. She was a woman who measured worth in square footage and stock portfolios. She had married David, the handsome, decorated soldier, but she had never truly seen the man, and she had certainly never seen his father. To her, Arthur was just the old man who lived in the spare room, the one with the strange, silent habits and the sad eyes. She saw his simple job as an embarrassment, his limp as a sign of frailty, his silence as a lack of ambition. She had no concept of a world where honor was a currency more valuable than gold, where a man's word was his bond, and where sacrifice was not a strategy, but a state of being. The only clue to Arthur's other life was a small, faded tattoo on the inside of his left wrist, usually hidden by his watch or the sleeve of his shirt. It was a cryptic symbol, a stylized ghost intertwined with a serpent eating its own tail. To anyone who saw it, it meant nothing. But in certain, very specific circles, in quiet rooms where maps were spread and nations' fates were decided, that symbol was a legend. It was the mark of a phantom, a whisper in the halls of power, a man who officially did not exist. The observer, a young work-study student named Sarah who often saw Arthur making his nightly rounds at the college, was perhaps the only one who sensed something more. She saw the way he moved, with a quiet economy of motion that belied his age and his limp. She saw the awareness in his eyes, the way he scanned every room not as a janitor, but as a sentinel. She'd once seen the tattoo when he'd rolled up his sleeve to fix a leaking pipe, and its stark, strange design had stuck in her memory. She didn't know what it was, but she knew it wasn't the kind of ink an ordinary old janitor got. She just saw him as a man of deep, profound sadness, but also of a strange, unshakable peace. She knew there was a story there, a great one, hidden beneath layers of grief and deliberate obscurity. The finality of her words hung in the air, more chilling than the November wind rattling the front door. Don't be dramatic. Pack your bags and learn to live on your own. Amanda delivered the line with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. She turned away from Arthur, her attention already shifting to her phone, which buzzed with a message from the real estate agent. The house, David's legacy, was already being appraised, its memories catalogued and assigned a market value. Arthur stood motionless for a long moment. The narrator, in an omniscient whisper, would convey his inner state. He felt no anger. Anger was a luxury, a hot, messy emotion he'd learned to control decades ago. What he felt was a cold, profound sorrow. Not for himself, but for her inability to see beyond the surface, for the poverty of a soul that could so easily discard a father's grief. He looked past her, his gaze landing on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. There, in a heavy silver frame, was a picture of David in his dress uniform. His smile so full of life it was a physical blow to Arthur's chest. David had been so proud of that uniform, so proud to serve. Amanda followed his gaze, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. She walked over, picked up the frame, and then, with a shocking lack of ceremony, she opened the back, slid the photo out, and tossed it onto the couch. She placed a new photo in the frame, a picture of herself smiling at a charity gala. "Time for a fresh start," she said, more to herself than to him. That single act was more brutal than any eviction notice. It was the erasure of his son. Without a word, Arthur turned and walked to his small room. He opened the closet. Inside hung 3 identical sets of work clothes, a simple jacket, and one old, dark suit for funerals. He took the duffel bag from the floor and began to pack. His movements were slow, deliberate, each item placed with care. A worn copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, a shaving kit, the small, framed photo of his late wife. He paused, his hand hovering over a small, lacquered wooden box on his dresser. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single medal. It wasn't a purple heart or a silver star. It was something else entirely, something dark and unadorned, marked with the same ghostly serpent as the tattoo on his wrist. Beside it lay a challenge coin, heavy and cold to the touch. He ran his thumb over its worn surface, the memories it held threatening to breach the walls he had so carefully constructed around his heart. He closed the box. He would not take it with him. That part of his life was over. It was buried with the men he had served with, and now it was buried with his son. He packed only the essentials, the things that defined Arthur the janitor, not the man they once called Ghost. As he zipped the bag, his gaze fell on his own reflection in the small mirror. He saw an old man, gray hair, lines of sorrow etched around his eyes, the slight stoop of his shoulders. For a moment, he wondered if Amanda was right. Maybe he was just a ghost, a relic of a forgotten war, haunting a life that was no longer his. But then he straightened his back. The movement was slight, almost imperceptible, but it was a correction, a realignment. The ghost was gone, but the soldier remained. He picked up his bag, walked out of the room, and did not look back. He passed Amanda in the hallway. She didn't even look up from her phone. He walked out the front door, closing it softly behind him, and stepped out into the cold, cleansing rain. The rain followed him through the city, a persistent, gray shroud. He found a room in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. The neon sign outside flickered, casting a sickly pink glow on the peeling wallpaper. For Arthur, it was just a place to be quiet, a place to grieve. But the world did not allow for quiet grief. The world demanded forms, proof, documentation. His son was gone, but the bureaucracy he left behind was immortal. Days later, Arthur found himself in the sterile, beige waiting room of the Veterans Affairs office. The air was thick with the silent frustration of men and women caught in a labyrinth of red tape. They were all waiting for appointments, for benefits, for recognition, for some small acknowledgement of the price they had paid. Arthur took a number and sat down, his duffel bag at his feet. He was just another face in the crowd, another old soldier with a story no one had time to hear. When his number was finally called, he approached the counter. Behind the plexiglass sat a young man named Kevin. Kevin wore a tie that was too tight and an air of bored authority. He chewed his gum with a rhythmic, irritating snap, his eyes glued to his computer screen. "Name?" he asked, not looking up. "Arthur Jensen," Arthur replied, his voice low. Kevin typed, his fingers tapping impatiently. "Don't see you. You have a claim number?" "My son," Arthur began, his voice catching slightly. "Sergeant David Jensen. He passed. I need to sort out his affairs." Kevin sighed, a long, put-upon exhalation. He finally looked up, his eyes scanning Arthur's simple work jacket and tired face with unconcealed disdain. "Okay, look, Grandpa," he said, the word dripping with condescension. "I'm sorry for your loss, but we have procedures here. I need David's service number, his DD-214, death certificate, proof of dependency. The list is long. You can't just walk in here and expect us to wave a magic wand." He pushed a thick stack of papers through the slot in the glass. "Fill these out, all of them, and get in line like everyone else. We have real heroes to deal with here, you know? Guys with actual combat injuries, not just whatever it is you've got going on." He gestured vaguely at Arthur's limp. Sitting a few desks away was Sarah, the work-study student from the college. She was filing documents, her heart sinking as she overheard the exchange. She recognized Arthur immediately. She saw the flash of pain in his eyes, a flicker so brief and controlled that anyone else would have missed it. But she also saw the immense dignity with which he absorbed the insult. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply took the stack of papers, his calloused fingers steady. "Thank you," he said, the words quiet but firm. As he turned, his sleeve slid up for just a second. From her angle, Sarah got a clear view of the inside of his wrist. She saw the tattoo, the ghost and the serpent. It was so stark, so out of place on this quiet, grieving father. It was a symbol of power, of something dangerous and secret. She watched as Arthur walked over to a hard plastic chair, sat down, and methodically began to fill out the first of 100 forms, his focus absolute. Kevin had already forgotten him, turning back to his screen. But Sarah couldn't look away. Who was this man? This quiet, humble janitor who was treated like a nobody, but who bore the mark of a phantom. The injustice of the scene settled in her stomach like a cold stone. She knew, with a certainty she couldn't explain, that the clerk had just dismissed a man he wasn't worthy of speaking to. The open loop in her mind pulled tight. She had to know more. The days that followed were a blur of gray skies and closed doors. Arthur's savings were meager, and the motel room was a temporary reprieve at best. He needed work. He found himself at a veterans' job fair held in the cavernous hall of a convention center. The air buzzed with forced optimism and the quiet desperation of men and women trying to translate their military skills into a civilian world that didn't understand their language. Booths were set up for logistics companies, private security firms, and tech startups, all draped in patriotic bunting. Arthur, in his clean but worn jacket, moved through the aisles. He was invisible. Recruiters' eyes slid right over him, searching for younger, more polished candidates. His limp, usually so controlled, felt more pronounced here, a visible liability. He stopped at a booth for a large corporate security firm. The recruiter, a man in a sharp suit with a gelled haircut and a Bluetooth headset, gave him a cursory glance. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, his tone polite but dismissive. "I'm looking for work," Arthur said simply. "Experience in security." The recruiter managed a tight smile. "We're really looking for dynamic individuals, sir. People with a background in modern threat assessment, cybersecurity, that sort of thing." He looked at Arthur's gray hair, at the lines on his face. "Thank you for your service, of course, whatever it was." He turned away before Arthur could even respond, his attention captured by a younger veteran in a crisp suit. The dismissal was absolute. He was a relic, an antique. The skills he possessed, honed in the deadliest environments on Earth, were untranslatable, invisible. He didn't have the right buzzwords, the right resume, the right look. Meanwhile, Amanda was moving forward with brutal efficiency. She had finalized the sale of the house. She organized a public memorial for David, not in a church, but at a chic event space downtown. It was less a ceremony of remembrance and more a public relations event for her. She invited local politicians, business leaders, and media. She gave a tearful, yet perfectly composed speech about her hero husband, her fallen warrior. The speech was full of platitudes she'd likely found online, a hollow echo of a life she never bothered to understand. Arthur was not invited. He learned about it from a small notice in the local paper. On the day of the memorial, he stood across the street, hidden in the shadows of an old oak tree as the rain began to fall again. He watched as black cars pulled up, as well-dressed guests hurried inside, shielding themselves with umbrellas. He could see Amanda at the entrance, greeting people, a grieving widow playing her part to perfection. From his vantage point, he could just make out the giant, smiling photo of David they had placed on an easel inside. He stood there for a long time, the cold rain seeping into his jacket, a solitary, silent mourner at his own son's wake. He wasn't there for them. He was there for David, to bear witness, to hold his ground. The disrespect he had faced from Amanda, from the clerk, from the recruiter, it was all just noise. Annoying but insignificant. The real pain was the silence where his son's voice used to be. As he stood there, his silent vigil a testament to a grief too profound for any public ceremony, he didn't know that he was being observed. Sarah, the student from the VA office, had seen the notice for the memorial too. Driven by the mystery of the man with the phantom tattoo, she had come, wanting to pay her own respects to the son of the man who intrigued her so. She saw him across the street, standing perfectly still in the downpour, a figure of immense solitary sorrow, and the conviction in her gut solidified into a hard certainty. The world had its heroes all wrong. The city decided to dedicate a new memorial wall in the main plaza, a polished black granite slab etched with the names of local service members who had fallen in the line of duty since the turn of the century. Sergeant David Jensen's name was one of the first to be carved. The dedication ceremony was a major civic event. A local news crew set up their cameras, A high school band practiced a somber march, and city officials milled about, looking important. Amanda, as the recent widow of a celebrated local hero, was given a seat of honor in the front row. She wore a stylish black dress, her grief tailored and presented for public consumption. She was, in this moment, the star of a tragedy she had written for herself. Arthur came, of course. He had to. He needed to see his son's name carved in stone, a permanent, undeniable testament to his life. He wore his simple jacket and stood quietly at the back of the crowd, partially obscured by a large flagpole. He wanted no attention. He only wanted to be near his son, to share in this one public moment of remembrance. But Amanda saw him. Her eyes, constantly scanning the crowd for cameras and important faces, eventually found his. A look of pure venom crossed her features. How dare he show up here? How dare he mar her perfect, solemn performance with his shabby, insignificant presence? She subtly flagged down one of the event's private security guards, a burly man with a thick neck and an earpiece. "That man," she whispered, pointing discreetly towards Arthur. "Over there. He's not supposed to be here. He's been harassing me. I think he's unstable. Could you please have him removed?" The guard, seeing the Gold Star widow and the disheveled-looking old man, didn't question it. He and his partner moved through the crowd, their expressions hard. They reached Arthur just as the mayor began his opening remarks. "Sir," the first guard said, his voice low but firm, "we're going to have to ask you to leave." Arthur looked at them, his expression unreadable. "I'm just watching," he said, his voice quiet. "Yeah, well, you can watch from somewhere else," the second guard said, grabbing Arthur's arm. "You're trespassing. Let's go." The crowd nearby began to murmur, turning to see the commotion. People saw a fragile-looking old man being strong-armed by two large security guards. They saw the beautiful, grieving widow looking on with a pained expression. They drew their own conclusions. Sarah was there, volunteering to hand out programs. Her blood ran cold when she saw what was happening. She rushed over. "Wait! Stop! He's his father. He's David Jensen's father," she pleaded, trying to get between them. The guard pushed her back, not roughly, but with an immovable firmness. "Ma'am, step aside. This is a private matter." Arthur was being publicly humiliated, dragged away from his own son's memorial. The weight of all the recent indignities, the eviction, the bureaucratic dismissal, the professional rejection, seemed to coalesce in this single galling moment. Yet he did not resist. He did not fight. He allowed them to pull him away, his face a mask of stoic resignation. The ghost knew how to be invisible, how to fade into the background. But Arthur Jensen, the father, was being forcibly erased. The tension in the plaza was a tightly wound spring, ready to snap. The mayor faltered in his speech, distracted by the disturbance. Amanda watched with a look of cold satisfaction. This was the final cleanup, the last loose end, being neatly tied up and discarded. Just as the security guards were about to push Arthur out of the plaza and into the street, a sound cut through the air, sharp and distinct. It was the sound of car doors opening and closing in perfect, metallic unison. 3 black, government-issue SUVs, having pulled up to the curb with silent, predatory grace, now sat idling. The crowd turned. The mayor stopped talking altogether. From the lead vehicle stepped a man who commanded attention simply by existing. He was tall and lean, in his late 50s, wearing the immaculate uniform of a 4-star general of the United States Army. His chest was a constellation of medals and ribbons, a visual history of a lifetime at the sharp end of American power. He was flanked by 2 other men, younger, in sharp, dark suits. They didn't look like aides or agents. They moved with the coiled, predatory stillness of apex predators, their eyes sweeping the crowd with an unnerving, professional calm. The general's gaze was like a targeting laser. It swept past the mayor, past the news cameras, past Amanda, and locked onto the back of the crowd, onto the small, undignified scuffle at the edge of the plaza. He saw the 2 guards manhandling a familiar, stooped figure. The general's face, which had been a mask of stern neutrality, hardened into something else, something cold and dangerous. He began to walk. His boots hit the pavement with a steady, rhythmic cadence that seemed to silence the entire plaza. The two men in suits fanned out slightly behind him, a human shield of lethal intent. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea. The security guards, feeling the sudden, dramatic shift in atmosphere, paused, their hands still on Arthur. They looked up and saw a four-star general bearing down on them like an impending storm. They froze. Amanda's look of satisfaction curdled into confusion, then into a dawning, sickening dread. She had no idea who this man was, but she recognized power when she saw it. And that power was focused entirely on the pathetic old man she had just tried to discard. The general did not slow down. He walked directly to the spot where Arthur stood. He stopped no more than 2 feet in front of him. The two security guards let go of Arthur's arms as if he had suddenly burst into flames. The general's eyes, sharp and clear, met Arthur's. For a moment, the two men just looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them that spanned decades of shared hardship and unspoken understanding. Then, in the dead silence of the plaza, under the watchful eyes of 100 stunned onlookers, General Marcus Thorne, commander of the Joint Special Operations Command, raised his right hand to his brow and executed the sharpest, most profound salute of his career. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Colonel," he said, his voice thick with a respect that bordered on reverence. "It's been too long." The word echoed in the stillness. "Colonel." The crowd gasped as one. The security guards took an involuntary step back. The mayor's jaw was slack. Sarah, the student, felt tears spring to her eyes, a wave of vindication washing over her. And Amanda Jensen's perfectly constructed world shattered into a million pieces. The old janitor, the burden, the ghost she had cast out into the rain, was a colonel. General Thorne held his salute for a long, pregnant moment before slowly lowering his hand. He kept his eyes locked on Arthur, a silent apology passing between them for this public intrusion into a private grief. Then he turned his gaze to the assembled crowd. His eyes, which had been filled with warmth and respect for Arthur, were now chips of ice. They swept over the dumbstruck mayor, the gawking crowd, the terrified security guards, and finally, they landed on Amanda. He didn't know the specifics of her cruelty, but he saw enough in her panicked face to understand. His voice, when he spoke again, was clear, calm, and carried to every corner of the plaza. It was the voice of a man accustomed to delivering briefings that changed the course of history. "My name is General Marcus Thorne," he began. "I command a part of the military that doesn't officially exist, and for 30 years, I had the distinct and profound honor of serving under the command of the man you see before you." He gestured, not with a grand sweep, but with a simple, respectful nod towards Arthur. "You see an old man in a simple jacket. I see Colonel Arthur Jensen." To the intelligence community, he was known by another name, a name whispered in fear by our enemies and in awe by our allies. They called him the Ghost. A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Ghost. It sounded like something from a spy novel. The general raised a hand, and the crowd fell silent again. "Colonel Jensen," he continued, his voice taking on a storyteller's cadence, "is a founding member of a Tier 1 unit so secret, its designation remains classified to this day. The list of his commendations is longer than this memorial wall, but you will never see them. They are locked in a vault, buried under layers of secrecy, because the missions he led were the kind that nations publicly deny ever happened." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "The limp that your security guards found so inconvenient?" The general's eyes bored into the two men, who looked as if they wanted the ground to swallow them. "He got that on a mountain in a country you've never heard of, dragging 3 wounded members of my team to safety under heavy fire for 2 days, after being shot himself. He received no medal for that because to award him one would be to admit we were ever there. The men he saved are alive today. Their children are alive today. Because of him." He then turned his gaze toward the memorial wall. He didn't come here today for your recognition. He came here as a father. His son, Sergeant David Jensen, was a fine soldier, a hero in his own right. But I will tell you a secret that even David didn't know. When David enlisted, Colonel Jensen, this man you see here, personally called me. He didn't ask for any favors. He didn't ask for a safe posting for his boy. He asked me to watch over him, father to father, because his own past was so secret, he couldn't even tell his own son the full truth of the world he was entering. The general reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a heavy, dark challenge coin. He held it up for the crowd to see. It was identical to the one in the box in Arthur's old room. It was marked with a ghost and a serpent. In our world, the general said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, there are heroes, and then there are men like this. This man is not a hero. He is the man that heroes tell stories about. He is a living legend. And you were about to throw him out of his own son's memorial. He let that final sentence hang in the air, a devastating indictment of every person present. The silence that followed the general's monologue was absolute. It was a heavy, profound silence, filled with the weight of shame, shock, and a dawning, collective awe. The wind rustled the flag on the pole, the sound unnaturally loud in the utter stillness. No one moved. The news camera, which had been focused on the mayor, was now zoomed in tight on Arthur's face, broadcasting his quiet, weathered dignity to the entire city. Arthur himself hadn't moved. He stood, his shoulders a little straighter now, his eyes fixed on the general, not with pride, but with a deep, weary gratitude. He had not wanted this. He had never wanted the spotlight. But he was grateful that the truth, at least, had been spoken for his son's sake. General Thorne turned his steely gaze back to the two security guards. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Unhand your commanding officer," he said, the words dripping with ice. The guards, who had already let go, flinched as if struck and took another 2 steps back, their faces pale with terror. Their simple job of event security had just collided with a world of shadows and legends they couldn't comprehend. Then the general's eyes found Amanda. She was a statue of exquisite horror. Her face, moments before a mask of smug satisfaction, was now ashen. Her carefully constructed world, her identity as the tragic widow of a local hero, had been obliterated. In its place was a new, horrifying reality. She had evicted and humiliated a national treasure, the revered father of her late husband. She looked small, petty, and irredeemably cruel. The crowd's gaze shifted towards her, and she visibly shrank under the weight of their silent judgment. The politicians, the business leaders, they all looked away from her, a subtle but complete social execution. The general walked back to Arthur, his demeanor softening once more. "Arthur," he said, his voice now gentle, "I am so sorry for your loss. David was a good man. He was like you." He placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder. "What do you need? A car? A place to stay? Anything. You name it." Arthur finally looked away from the general, his gaze shifting to the black granite wall behind him. He scanned the names until he found the one he was looking for. SGT, David Jensen. For the first time, a crack appeared in his stoic facade. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. His voice, when he spoke, was thick with an emotion he had held back for weeks. "Just came to see my boy's name," he said. "That was all. No anger, no request for vindication. Just the simple, heartbreaking desire of a father." The general nodded slowly, his own eyes shining with emotion. He understood perfectly. Honor, duty, and love, those were the only things that mattered in the end. Without another word, Arthur gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the general. A nod of thanks, a nod of farewell. Then he turned, not looking at the crowd, not looking at Amanda, and began to walk away. He moved with the same quiet dignity, the same steady limp, leaving the scene of his own vindication behind him. He didn't want the accolades. He didn't want the apologies. He had done his duty. He had honored his son. And now he just wanted to be quiet again. The crowd watched him go, a silent, parting sea of stunned faces. Sarah stood crying, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of justice restored. She finally understood. True greatness doesn't need a stage. It just is. The camera follows Arthur as he walks away from the plaza, his solitary figure shrinking against the backdrop of the city. He doesn't look back. The sounds of the stunned crowd, the whispered apologies, the frantic questions from the news reporters, they all fade into the background, irrelevant noise in the quiet landscape of his mind. He walks not toward a new life of recognition and honor, but back toward the anonymity he has always cherished. His purpose was not to be revealed, but simply to grieve. The resolution is not in the crowd's adulation, but in his quiet departure. The narrator's voice returns, somber and reflective, over a slow-motion shot of Arthur turning a corner and disappearing from view. And so the ghost vanished once more. He had walked out of the shadows for a brief, blinding moment, not for himself, but for a name carved in stone. He left behind a city in shock, a daughter-in-law entombed in her own shame, and a crowd of people who had been forced to look beyond the surface and see the truth. They had been given a lesson that day, a lesson in humility, a lesson in respect. They learned that the world is full of quiet heroes, of men and women whose greatest battles were fought in secret, whose deepest scars are invisible to the naked eye. The scene might cut to a shot of Arthur, later that evening, sitting on the edge of his bed in the cheap motel room. He is holding the single, framed photo of his late wife, wiping a speck of dust from the glass. His mission is complete. He has ensured his son's honor. Now he returns to his own quiet life, to his memories, to the profound peace that comes from a life lived with unwavering integrity. True honor, the narrator continues, is not a medal on a uniform or a title before a name. It is a private currency, traded in moments of sacrifice and courage that no one will ever see. It needs no audience, seeks no applause. It is a quiet, steady light that burns within, a moral compass that holds true even in the darkest of nights. Arthur Jensen asked for nothing, and he received the one thing that mattered. His son's memory was honored, untarnished by the petty cruelties of a world that too often forgets what is truly valuable. And now we turn the final pages of this chapter and ask you, the viewer, to reflect with us. How many heroes walk among us every single day? The quiet librarian, the patient schoolteacher, the tired-looking old man at the bus stop. How many of them carry stories of incredible courage and sacrifice, hidden behind humble lives and unassuming eyes? It makes you wonder, doesn't it? It makes you want to look closer, to listen more carefully, to judge less harshly. Tell us in the comments below, have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance, only to learn their incredible, hidden story? Have you ever witnessed an act of quiet, uncelebrated heroism? Your story matters to us. Your experiences are part of this larger human narrative we are all trying to understand. For more stories that inspire, that challenge our perspectives, and that remind us of the profound strength of the human spirit, make sure you subscribe to Stories That Matter. Click the bell icon to turn on notifications, so you never miss a moment of revelation. Thank you for joining us, for listening, and for remembering that behind every face, there is a story worth telling.